fully aware. So.
Okay, please turn your microphones on and pull them forward, and we'll get started. Welcome to the February 14th, 2022 meeting of the Town of Niskayuna Planning Board and Zoning Commission. Mr. Henry, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Laflamme.
He's here. Wait, hold on, clerk. He's coming.
Oh, he's on, okay.
Okay.
Good
Mr. Laflamme.
Present.
Mr. Screbutennis is excused and absent. Mr. Khan.
Aye, here. Sorry.
Mr. McPartlin is excused and absent. Mr. Darpino.
He's,
I can see that he's here.
yeah.
Ms. Shenfield.
Here.
Ms. Gold.
Where is it?
Chairman Walsh.
Here. Okay, thank you. Let's see. First up is the approval of the minutes from the January 24th, 2022 meeting. Those were included in your packet. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Gold. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Shenfield. Discussion, changes to the minutes that were provided? Okay, just I'm going to abstain on the minutes. I do have one correction that was brought forward from the planning office. And that's line 126. Line 126 states, Ms. Robinson stated that this new application, this is a new application, and that should be Mr. Henry, not Mr. Clark, provided additional information. So it's a pretty simple change. So we can just do a friendly amendment there, I believe. Okay. All right. Any other changes to the minutes at all or comments? Okay. Mr. Henry, please call the roll.
Mr. Laflamme.
Aye.
Mr. Khan.
Aye.
Mr. Darpino.
Aye.
Ms. Shenfield.
Aye.
Ms. Gold.
Aye.
Chairman Walsh. Or
Abstain.
you're abstaining. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's see. We have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move right to privilege of the floor. Anyone wishing to be heard regarding any planning and zoning matters in the town of Niskayuna, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Looks like we just have one applicant here, so nobody for privilege of the floor here present in town hall. Do we have any emails or anybody online that would like to speak?
No emails or requests to go online tonight.
Okay. Hearing and seeing no one, we'll close privilege of the floor. We have no unfinished business tonight and no new business tonight, so we'll move right to our discussion items. We have a few discussion items tonight. The first being 3140 Troy Road, site plan application for build out of an existing medical office space building from the current 4,100 square feet to a proposed 13,400 square feet. Mr. Trotta, are you online with us tonight?
Yes, I am. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
I know there's the agenda packet, and I don't know if you had an opportunity to take a look over it. I don't know if you want to speak or bring us up to date with anything special before I turn it over to the project lead.
You could turn it over to the project lead, and I could walk you guys through the presentation as well. It's completely up to you.
Okay, well, we'll turn it over to Ms. Shenfield then.
Okay, so we had taken a look at this project. Mr. Trotta had brought the application at the last meeting to go ahead and increase the amount of space that's being used within the building to ultimately have additional medical offices. And with that, we had to look at the parking space component. So Mr. Trotta did, in our newest packet, send some updated, revised drawings that showed where he could identify some additional extra parking spaces that could be added, whether it's taking out some existing shrubbery or paving over some other surfaces. But he did outline that for us. He also outlined an additional lot that's owned by the applicant down the road. It's about, I don't know, 20, less than a quarter of a mile away. So it is a little bit of a walk, but it is something that's almost adjacent to the property that would be another opportunity for additional parking spaces if it was needed. So taking a look at it, the planning department had also put together in our packet what the parking spaces or what the minimum amount of parking spaces would be for the gross, either the gross or the leased space. So looking at it, and Mr. Trotta can jump in, what he's looking for is to use 12,184 square feet of the project. Is that correct, Mr. Trotta?
That is correct. And I just wanted to obviously let you walk the board through it, but I could kind of give you in the presentation where we were last week and where we are now. And the only update is I did have in-depth discussions with the owner as well as the broker for the owner, which is the realtor. And that I know where we are at the moment and what we'd be requesting the board this evening.
I'll let you go ahead, Mr. Trotta, then. That's okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So basically, I kind of wanted to very quickly walk you through some of these slides because they're really for reference and kind of where we were last week, rather than go into depth on where we are now. So as we were presenting, the first slide is just the existing site. It just gives a little bit more detail than we talked, and we kind of brought it up on the aerial, but it really shows the property line and it shows where the right-of-way line is and the vicinity. However, obviously, as you know, as an aerial photograph, it's at an angle, so it gives an approximate location of where everything stands. One of the things to note is that at the front and the sides, as I expressed last time, there's a fairly significant slope that's going basically from the driveway coming in from Troy Schenectady, as well as facing Troy Schenectady Road and the backside of the building. I just wanted to kind of bring those up, and I wanted to skip slide 2 if possible. And the reason why is because we'll come back to that because that's basically where we're at. So slide 3 and 4, I wanted to explain that we went in depth with Laura and Clark was instrumental on really navigating the waters of what the code reads word for word on how the area is calculated. So we went in with the assumption that we were looking at occupied area or if you will, leasable area. And the reality is the zoning code is based on gross area. So the gross area, the difference between the two is occupied area and gross area is to the exterior footprint of the building, if you will. And the occupied area is typically what a building code is or leasable area excludes any spaces that are not occupied for periods of time, meaning corridors, stairwells, elevator shafts, things of storage areas, those kind of things. So that being said, everything we're showing in 3 or 4 was where we were calculating to get our parking calc in line from what I was presenting last time. It's kind of null and void, if you will. So it is a basis of slide, it's actually 5, which I provided to the board, is the national standards are based upon occupant load. And that is based upon the 222 square feet per parking space, if you will. And that kind of comes into very similar to where we are because we have 56, actually it was 55, but there's one parking space that wasn't striped that was next to the dumpster. So let's say 56 existing parking spaces that the national standards get to 55 by the overall square foot of occupant load. Now, the reason I'm just bringing this up, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because you as a board really can't approve something that doesn't meet code and it's not consistent. So I get that. So I just wanted to kind of show you because the question was asked on how we came up with the calculation, but I don't want to go into the weeds on it because it's really irrelevant at this point anyway, if that makes sense. So that being said, one thing of note, it was a question came up and I verified, talking to the owner going out there, is that the area that is shown on the sheet 3 is, and sheet 3 and 4, it's labeled as elevator. There is an actual elevator was built with an Otis elevator that is in the building. So there is complete ADA accessibility for both the first floor level and the lower level. If that makes sense for everybody. Now, all of that being said, I could answer questions about the other one, but I don't want to, in respect for your time, I don't want to waste any time on that. So I kind of wanted to go to sheet 6, 7, and 8, are really the existing elevations, the building's built, as we all know, and photos of the existing building that we kind of brought up last time as well, to just kind of so everybody understands that on sheet 6, the bottom elevation shows on the right-hand side is where the parking area is. And then as you travel down the site, and this is the driveway, main driveway coming in, you can see how the building actually progresses down into grade. So we're at a full 2-story at the left-hand side of the elevation shown on this. So I just wanted to kind of show everybody, so they can see it in context and for reference, that this bottom elevation kind of shows the grade on the side and how it's progressively going down. The top elevation, which is the south elevation, that's facing the parking lot, that shows that it is a single story facing the parking lot. Now, if we flip to sheet 7, it's the opposite on on the mirror image of that elevation. So on the north side, which is facing Troy Schenectady, is actually a full 2-story. And you can see to the right of that elevation that it shows how there's a significant staircase and the landing that comes into the main building. So I just want to kind of put that in context. The other part of this between the bottom, can we stay on sheet 7? On sheet 7, and this is kind of a footnote that we'll go back to, is sheet 7, the side facing the parking lot, as you can see in the photo as well, and this is the adjacent neighbor's parking lot, not our parking lot, on the side of the building. You can see that there's complete access. It's maybe 4 or 5 feet exposed, and then it goes all the way down to about 11 to 12 feet at the far right side on that side of the building, which is the east elevation. On the west side, if we could go back to 6, page 6, it shows that when you're coming up the driveway, that side at the lower level really has no natural light because it's underground. So what I was getting at is the east elevation has complete natural light and has access. The west elevation at the lower level, only half of the building is exposed. And the reason why I bring that up, it's a footnote when we get to the later sheets of showing exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. If we could go on to sheet 8. Sheet 8 is just a very simple building section overall and 2 wall sections. The reason why I show the 2 wall sections is the one in the middle, it shows where that paving line is or where that landing is. And the one on the side shows the full 2-story. So kind of everybody has for reference, understands what this building is, because I know it was a little confusing until we started looking at the photos before. Now if we go to the next sheet, sheet 9 shows which was requested on Vly Road, the property that's owned by the business operations manager for this facility. It's approximately 900 feet door to door, and I'm meaning from you get out of your car to you're walking in the building. Now, obviously, you can see here it's a little shorter than that from anyone that, if you're comparing it to who would be actually parking in the parking lot compared to walking down the street or parking in it. Now, we picked up 7 spots in there, but I do want to say that is a possibility. However, I would recommend, and the owner even asked the question, recommend that we don't do this route, because the problem is in the future, if he ever wanted to sell that house, now we have, you're selling a residential house that has a parking lot tied to a commercial building. So even though you could have an easement, it just gets a little muddy. And right now everything works great. He's a business operations manager and for the facility. But if something happens, something changes, I really don't think this is a viable option, in my professional opinion. But I did want to show the board where it was in vicinity, because we did bring it up. So can we flip to sheet 10? Now let's get to the nitty gritty. So as we were saying, sheet 10 and 11 are what we are proposing. Now, the reason why I say when we were proposing, and you're going to ask the question of what was the change, the change was I advised our client and we talked through, and they're okay at this point, we wanted to get with something, and this was talking with the realtor as well, is they have 2 tenants that are interested in the space. They do not have 3 tenants. So it makes no sense to go outside and get a variance and so on and so forth and go through different challenges when we don't need the space at this moment. So it could change a year or 2 from now. And if it does, we would come back to the board with that specific project. And the other reason is one of the suggestions was from the board, can we acquire, the parking area from the adjacent neighbor? And the answer to that is, in the long run, potentially. Right now, it's not a viable option, and it doesn't make economical sense. And it's just something not on the table at the moment. But a year or so from now, it could be. So we are trying to accomplish what is the task at hand, if you will, what they're requesting and have right now for tenants that are looking to occupy the space. Number one. Number two, within the board, and I know it's listed in the notes that the board is able, the planning board, without going to zoning, is able to go 25% over the requirement for parking if the board so sees, and this is the caveat, that you have to basically land bank that parking, that you could prove that you can put into parking on the site. However, you're not electing to do so for various reasons. Reduction in impervious area, effective landscaping ratios, things of that nature. They're just not desirable. So that being said, what we're looking to do is occupy half, or a little less than half, if you will, of the lower level, and that's called Medical Office 2 on sheet 10. And the rest of code does allow, in the gross square footage footprint, any unfinished basement, which would be that entire white area on sheet 10, which is basically the storage areas, and any unfinished area, mechanical areas, things of that nature, are all excluded from that calculation. Now, one thing that is kind of questionable, but Clark and I decided to go on the side of caution, is we counted the elevator and the stair towers twice. We counted them on the main floor, the first floor, and we also counted them on the lower level. Normally you wouldn't do that. However, we did because your code does not specifically exclude them. So we just wanted to make sure that we don't do something that is not compliant with other projects that you could look at. And just wanted to be in compliance on that route. So if we could flip the sheet 10, I changed this to 11, I apologize. Medical Office Area 1, this is the first floor. This is the entire footprint of the building. And that entire footprint basically comes to 7,885, which is underneath that 8,000 square foot original approval. And the reason why it's not exactly 8,000 is you could see the little jigs and jogs that are within the building, that it never comes out to exactly 8,000, but we're underneath that, so it's compliant. That being said, if you add these two areas together, basically what we're requesting, which is the left-hand side of the lower level, and we're requesting the first floor, it adds up to 12,224 square foot. Now, that includes the stairs as well on the lower level again. So the 267 is counted twice. So we're well within that means, if you will. And if you take that, there's basically, if you take 7,885, which is the overall, multiply that by 2, it's 15,458. And that's what's shown on sheet 11. But what we're looking for is the 12,224 square feet divided by the 175 by code, comes out to 69.85, or 70 spaces are required. So now, if we go back up to sheet 2. So sheet 2, how does this all work? So how this works is basically right now we have 56 spaces. And if you look at 56 spaces, It includes the one by the dumpster that you can see that little white line. But we also have opportunity on the other side of where the dumpster is, where those 15 are. There originally I showed on our presentation 2 spaces. I went a little conservative on this and only showed 1 because there's a stormwater inlet to the right of that space. And we didn't want to impact, the catch basin or anything by, suggesting that we could pave that area. The other 2 spaces are in the parking field, are basically the island, if you will, is the existing island. We could convert to parking. However, that reduces the impervious area, and obviously it's more beneficial to have a nice curved island in there. We are also able to accomplish on the right-hand side of this. Obviously, there's a slope going down, but we would be able to, if we got rid of all the landscaping and the grass that's in the front and the side, we would be able to add an additional 11 spots. So if you take those 11 spots we could add, and we also take the 2 that are the curved island, that gives you 13, and you take the 1 additional space that's at the end of the aisle when you're coming in from the access, it gets us to 14. 14 plus 56 is 70. So we can accomplish the 70 spots. However, to do so would be very detrimental to the overall site. Obviously, we're losing a lot of landscaped area. We're losing a lot of impervious area. We're disturbing like very, very nicely established landscaping, not just green space, but it's nicely established, as you saw in the earlier photos. But I want to keep in mind the reason for this is your code reads that you would carry a bond for 3 years. And if it caused an issue with parking, or parking became an issue, you still could build these spots. Theoretically, you could build them, or whatever made sense. Maybe not the entire thing, or maybe you're 4 or 5 spots short, whatever. So that being said, that is what we're proposing. However, we would also request from the board that we don't build those at this time. And what it does is it allows us to see when a tenant takes the right-hand half of the first floor, because as we know, the left hand is the only left hand of the first floor is the only space that's actually currently occupied. So say we take the right-hand side and we take the if the board approves this, the lower level left-hand side portion to what is code compliant within the planning board's, if you will, abilities, we could see how the parking could work out over time in the next year or so. And that's what the intent of the code, my understanding of the intent of the code, is to have that 3-year bond to see if it causes a problem. So we don't believe it will. However, we're putting our money where our mouth is and saying, you put a bond on there, and basically if it is, we could change it. That being said, I did want to point out one minor item. I brought this up verbally on the last time we met, but if you look to the far left-hand side, those 3 spaces we could pick up by enclosing. One planning board member suggested potentially enclosing one of the access areas. You can see with the big X right next to it, what it does is you literally put in 3 to lose 4. So because you have to have this circulation around the other spaces. So it really kind of defeats its purpose by doing that. But I did want to answer your questions from last time and show an illustration of how we can accomplish A, the 70 spots, B, what can be done, what can't be done, and C, just answer the question of Vly Road, how that comes into play, whether it makes sense, doesn't make sense. And also where we also came, and this was Clark and I, and Clark could attest to this, so we worked diligently for days on figuring out exactly how the code reads, so you guys can feel very comfortable of what we're proposing right now. That being said, I know it was a lot to digest, but I wanted to make it as quickly as possible so you can understand where we're coming from and what we're requesting to the board.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Trotta. And thank you for Mr. Henry for working with the applicant to clarify and document that what's required per our code. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Does any of the other board members have any other questions?
Several. One, is the access road to Vine Point that runs behind this property public or private?
It's private.
It's a
It's a private residence.
So the road to Vine Point is private. This off-site parking that they're calling reserve parking would require use of a private road.
No, he's taking that off the table.
But yeah, he took that off the
That's-
table.
that's
I'm sorry.
banking
It's a
if
private
needed.
residence. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, he's not even
He's-
using it
yeah.
for banking.
It's not-
Yeah, it wouldn't be required for option B, I
I'd
guess
say
we're
it
calling
would
it.
not be, I don't think we could approve it. as a
Anyway.
Private road, so it's totally off the discussion.
Correct.
Okay,
That's fine.
and the other problem with that, in my mind, would be we'd have two uses on that property, and we don't allow that either.
Yeah.
So
That
it's really not,
so that
all the
parcel
parking has to be on the site.
that parcel isn't even in the town of Niskuna, so I don't know if the two uses would apply, but you would imagine the town of Colony would have something similar.
That was the
Yeah.
next question I was getting to.
Leslie, get pull your microphone over in front of you, please.
That was the next question I was getting to, exactly where's the town line fall, because I wasn't sure. For just clarification's sake, for anybody who's trying to follow this from the stuff in the minutes, we have town board approval for a special use permit, but this isn't being treated as a special use permit. And I believe that's because in the interim, since that was issued, that the area was rezoned to RP. Am I correct on that?
So the special use permit is issued for the use and the planning board looks at site plan.
So it's still covered by special use permit,
Yeah, the use isn't changing.
but they limit it to the 8,000 square feet also.
It wasn't limited. Like Kevin had this question and Clark and I think I even asked Elena, checked into this. It's referenced, the site plan is referenced for 8,000 square feet, but it isn't a condition of the town board resolution that it be 8,000 feet. And square footages change like during site plan and stuff like that. So if it was a condition of the special use permit that it be 8,000, then they would have to return. But the special use permit is for the use. It wasn't conditioned on a certain square footage.
But it specifies for approval of a special use permit to allow construction of an 8,000 square foot professional medical office building. And
Yeah, Leslie,
if the zoning hasn't changed on it, it still needs
so I
special
mean,
use permit. This is called an expansion and it needs the process again.
we checked into it. It's,
Other attorneys have ruled otherwise.
well, that we made the determination it does not trigger a new special use permit. That was made by my office.
I'm not comfortable with that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm just stating my concern.
Okay.
Okay, Elena will have an opportunity, to think about that some more before we have an
Yeah.
actual resolution, okay?
And
So I would be interested in hearing what the clear reasoning is for that too. Given that the square footage is mentioned in the town board resolution.
I'll draft a legal memo.
Okay, thanks.
thank you.
It would be good, I mean, I think it's good to probably put that in the record.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks.
And
If I may add, in the future, I think on site plans, it's very common that they're a footprint, and it's probably a good idea in the future that it's clarified that it's a footprint or it's the total square footage. So I think it's a valid question, but I do agree that it's basically because the 8,000 when it went to building permits by occupant load, and there's really nowhere in the code that kind of deciphers between the two. So I could see that being a future issue as well for
it
others.
has never been an issue before. I've been attending these meetings both as a member and a non-member for decades. And
Totally
it's
understand.
always
Not-
been an
not
understanding
questioning
that it
your
referred
town
to the
meeting.
total gross area.
Excellent.
And we do have something in the code that addresses that.
Understood.
The other issue that had come up at the prior meeting was that we had a building permit that allowed for the building to be built larger than had been approved. And you were doing some additional research. You recalled seeing a memo that was relevant, but couldn't find it.
Yeah, I still can't locate that memo, but the building permit was issued for like 12,558 square feet or something like that. It was in your packet
But
at
if
the
it
last
was-
meeting.
Yes, but if it
Yeah.
was issued with a note to a file with a caveat, basically, that makes a difference.
I
I
haven't been
will
able to
note-
locate that. Yeah, I do remember reading it, but I can't find it.
Well, the other thing is when those memos to file were done after discussion with the planning board, there's usually mention of it in the meetings in the meetings of the minutes. Yeah, the minutes of the meetings relevant to that time period. Maybe a check of them would be helpful.
We can look at that.
And if it's a matter of getting somebody who can take the time to reading them, I'm happy to come in and help with that. But there's gaps that leave me wondering where we're at, really.
Okay,
I like every detail in place.
thank you, Leslie. Ms. Gold. The only thing I guess I'll add regarding the current status of the application with the work of the planning department and the applicant regarding the 770 parking spaces. I could see, my view is that that'll work. We have the opportunity to give a 25% waiver. Our standard is 175 square foot. I know that you stated that the industry standard is 222. So if that's really a standard that works better than ours, then you will never have a problem if we give you the waiver and allow you to go forward with, I guess we call it applicant's second choice, which is now the primary choice, the 70 parking spots. So if we have 70 required based on the calculations in the agenda statement, and we have 56, you don't need a full 25% waiver. You only need a 20% waiver to get to where you need to be. A 20% waiver means that you need to bank and show where you would come up with the 14 parking spots, which would make up the difference between 56 and 70, which is a 20% waiver. And those 14 would be, the 2 plus the 1 plus the 11 that are difficult to add on the main lot. And again, we're not saying you have to add them at this point in time, but you would have to submit a site plan that shows exactly where those would be in order for us to go forward if we were to have a resolution on this. And then again, if your business doesn't work, or if there's concerns, complaints, people can't park, can't make their appointments, which I know that you're stating shouldn't be a problem. But if we were to get there, we would, have the opportunity to say, okay, we'll pull out, the 2 plus 1 first parking spaces to try to alleviate it. And if that doesn't work, then we could go after the 11. Of course, at that point in time, which could be a matter of 1, 2, or 3 years, whatever it may be, right? Things might have changed also, like you stated with the business next door, and maybe there'd be different opportunities to not go into that green space or that tough to deal with terrain on those 11 spaces, which obviously would be a benefit for all of us, and aesthetically would be an improvement also. It would be good not to do that. So my understanding is, and then we'd be looking at a 20% waiver based on the numbers generated with the applicant and with Mr. Henry. And those parking spaces would have to be, again, shown, the bank parking, formally shown.
And we'd be completely fine as a condition of approval to show a formal site plan.
Yep.
And
Yep. What does everybody think? What do you think, Daisy?
Yeah, I agree with that. My thought would be the same. And obviously the applicant has a vested interest. They want to make sure it works because they want to add the additional medical offices. And if a medical office doesn't have ample parking, then it's not going to be viable to rent that space anyways.
Yeah. So Chairman Walsh, I'm okay with that math and it makes sense. I do know, and this is for Mr. Trotta, right? And Laura, I think I'd informed you of
Yeah.
that. I do think that there should be some, I'm not, take this as a mutual recommendation. The few times I've been by that place, the parking lot is actually quite full.
Mhm.
And so it's hard for me to conceive by the numbers of cars I've seen there on multiple occasions that you can actually fit another, in fact, the math is the math on the parking spots, but physically, when you go by there on multiple occasions, I've seen that parking lot have all but maybe 10 spots or 12 spots occupied. So at the end of the day, as a town planning board member, we can go based on the math and the square footage, right? But, the medical providers going in there, right? We're never going to hear the complaint about parking, right, Laura?
Well,
That's rare.
it would be rare, but
Right.
sometimes they do call us.
Right, but I mean,
Not very often.
yeah, so this is just, like I said, a neutral recommendation to you, Mr. Trotter, that inevitability might come sooner than you think.
And I had the
Understood,
same
and it's a
observation.
good comment. That's it.
Yep.
Understood.
Yep, just go there 5 days in a row and just see what happens.
Any other comments from anybody online, from planning board members? Any thoughts? All right. So I guess, and if it's okay with Ms. Shenfield, then we could call for a resolution for the next meeting, granting an updated site plan that allows the option 2 applicants, which is now the primary choice for the total, is at 12,224 square feet, with the 20% waiver to get to the parking spots. And then the site plan will have to be updated to show those 2 + 1 + 11 spots in case someday they do actually have to be put into play. Okay, and again, when it comes to that point in time, if there's another option that has become available, I think we can have the opportunity to look at that also, but we need to be formal with the site the way it stands today to be able to show those parking spaces. Does that sound reasonable with
May
the
I
board?
ask? Yeah, absolutely. May I ask a question? Should I show them as land banked on the site, or how would you like them shown?
I mean, you show them where they would be, drawn that here's where the parking spots are, you don't need to do the construction details. You don't need to do,
Okay, gotcha.
you just need to say,
Understood.
this is where they're going to be.
Understood.
Obviously, the cost may be a problem when you get there, based on the topos down along the front of the building there, but we'll have to cross that when we get there, if indeed we need to. Does
Understood.
that sound reasonable with the board, Ms. Shenfield?
Yep, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so unless anybody opposes, we'll have a resolution, assuming that the applicant can get into the updated drawings to the planning department in time to make the next scheduled meeting, which is 28th of February. Okay,
And of course, I do not support going forward. I think there are too many unanswered questions still.
okay. In the meantime, we'll document the town's position on the special use permit, any concerns that you may have, and also include that in the packet for the next meeting, okay?
I
Sound reasonable?
appreciate that.
Okay,
I'm perfectly fine with where things are at, but just coming back then to, let's just say there is an inevitability that we have to go into the land bank spaces. Does the board find it acceptable that we're going to basically get rid of a lot of that green landscaping?
Yeah, I was just double checking that in the code to make sure that you didn't need an additional waiver to put it in the front of the building. I don't think you do, but we just need to double check section D to make sure that parking in the front and on the side is still meeting like the commercial parking setbacks.
Okay.
Or you would,
Actually, if you go to sheet 1, if you look at the parking lot next door, it goes all the way to the road. Just a footnote.
oh,
That's
they
different.
will, but a lot of those were built prior to our zoning code. Yeah, so like
That's
it's
great,
probably
Donna.
not representation of exactly what's allowed. It's close, like the section that I was looking at that we just got to make sure is D. And I mean, it's up to the board. If the banked parking looks generally okay, then we would just make sure that in a resolution, if we're approving banked parking and it's slightly closer to the lot line, then we would make sure that it's covered.
Okay.
Yeah, all I'm saying is, what I meant by all my comments before was not just for the applicant to make an honest assessment of their own parking requirements, but also
Sure.
for us to be willing as a board to accept that bank parking as depicted will have to go in.
Right. It'll make the front of that building look very different.
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't particularly like it personally, but we're, I guess applicants gambling, we're gambling that they're not actually going to have to put it in play.
Right, but I
yeah.
mean,
But,
but
yeah.
yeah, but
Should we be gambling like that?
Well, I think so. I mean, personally.
And I don't.
Yeah, and the other thing is
Under
that
very full of-
the other thing we could do also, maybe, Laura, is that maybe we could also have a condition that states at that point in time, if there are other options available, that it could come back to the planning board. Because if we could get something else in play, if that was required, for instance, they could lease parking spaces from whoever takes over the business next door. They could lease, 5 parking spaces, or whatever kind of agreement they would have. We wouldn't get middle of the agreement, but we've done that at other locations in town where other businesses have supported, and they actually put up a sign that it's okay to park there, and that,
Yeah.
met the requirement.
And I mean, Chairman Walsh, I wouldn't necessarily call it a gamble. We're taking the steps and stages as we're going through. But like I said, for me, when I poured over this over the weekend and knowing what I think I know about that property, I'm like, well, we'll just have to accept that we're just going to get rid of all that landscaping and greenery. And as long as the remaining is to code, that's all we can go by.
Yeah, and I hope not, but
Yeah, I think though, like, north's not up, but the north on this drawing, sort of towards the top of this drawing, like those parking spaces would probably have a relatively limited impact on the landscaping. It's the ones that are right in front of the building.
Yep.
So like if it was tight and they needed to build those
They could do it in a phase.
6, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And it would leave them with enough green space, or would it?
That's another thing that we'll have to double
Yeah.
check, yeah. So we'll check that too.
I think it's worth making those.
Yeah.
adjustments.
Yeah, so like I bet you that it needs that the banked parking, which we hope they wouldn't have to build, will need a waiver to the front lot line there. I feel like I can tell it's too close. And then potentially we'll look at the green space.
all right.
Hey, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Laflamme.
just to clarify, are we asking or are we noting in our approval or denial that if the banked lots are going to be considered, we will first ask the applicant to look at adjacent leasing prior? Is that part of the expectation?
Well, we could do that. I mean, I think that the order would be, put the 2 parking spots into play in the 1, right? That would always be first. Hopefully that, helps out before you go to the 11 difficult ones. And if there's another option in place, and we could state, in the condition that there's other options available that would, that are preferred over construction within the front yard, basically, that we would pursue those. I think we could word that condition such, Mr. Laflamme. So
It
thank
would
you.
be helpful.
Yep.
Like Ms. Sheffield had mentioned, in the example with Union Street, it's been successful, those shared lots. And of course, the visual impact of putting additional spots in the front when everyone's looking at vacant lots to the east would be negative, right? So
I agree. All right, so the planning department's got a couple open items. Applicant has an open item to update the drawing showing where the bank parking would be. They're also going to look into the history of the special use permit. And if all that comes together, we will have a tentative resolution for the next meeting. And assuming we get there, we'll take action on this request at the next meeting.
Mr. Trotter, based on what I said, do you plan on doing a traffic parking count?
They're going to naturally do it. And what I mean by that is the tenant on the first floor would be the first one to move in. And obviously you'd monitor the parking as it's going. And then obviously it really depends on the type of medical use, type of medical office. Like some of like the scheduled procedures or things of that nature may be a very low demand. But if they had a constant flow of patients, it may be a higher demand. So it really depends on the type of tenant. The one I can tell you, and I could share with you, the one tenant that's looking at the first floor is a dermatology office that I've talked to them, and they said parking is never an issue with us because of how they're scheduled. So they're scheduled. Sometimes they're off hours, either early or later in the day, before or after work, and they're very short time frames that they come in. It's more consultation than anything. So that's one of the scenarios, but it could be a higher demand if there's a different type of medical office use. So it's really going to play out to answer your question. So they're going to play it by ear, but they know that it could be a problem. And to answer Mr. Blue's question, is practically if it's reasonable, if you will, reasonable to share parking as far as the cost and leasing them, they're definitely going to go that route. They don't want to construct a new lot and rip out all their landscaping. That is their desire. They would like to keep the landscaping, nice, pretty building. We talked about it last time that it actually looks like a big house. It doesn't even look like a commercial building. So we wanted to preserve that integrity in the long run, but that would be our first choice as well. Just to answer your question.
I'm going to throw a caution out to you because I've been to a number of dermatology practices over the years. Their parking requirements have varied considerably depending on what they specialize in or don't specialize. The ones who do a lot of surgery, their parking needs are far lower.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. That's why I talked to the vice president of this is a national firm. They have about 500 offices, and they told me their parking count is way under what the requirement of what we were going to allocate for them. So to answer your question, you're 100% right. I mean, very, very well spoken on your thoughts of what should be done. However, we have to cater the design to who the user is. So I have to take them as their expert on their word on what they need. So to answer your question.
I just want to make sure that we are well within our code and well within our standard practice.
Right. The 25% is well within our code. We've done it before on different sites, like Daisy had mentioned, 1769 Union Street. A couple other ones too. We actually even touched on it with Mr. Singh at the last meeting. Although it wasn't bank spaces, I think he just was sort of not maximizing his striping. If he were to restripe it, he could easily pick up the spaces that he needed. But because he had big trucks and, it's a wide open asphalt. But anyway, the one thing that we will check is that I want to make sure that if the banked parking is going to be constructed, that I think it does require a couple minor waivers that we would have to include if we were going to say, yeah, the bank parking is here. Well, I don't know if the green space one is minor. I have to look at that. But I think that there's just one section, like I said, that's probably too close to the lot line.
I mean, thanks for doing those last 2 points, Laura, because like I said, from my perspective as a planning board member, I've already approved the bank parking because I think that's the only way this property is going to work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we took that, it's a bit of a balancing, right? Because we don't want to build the parking lots for Christmas on these sites. Like, we don't want them to all to be pavement and then not have them be filled with cars. But we also obviously,
Right.
Like, where's the overflow going to go here, right?
We define
So,
phases and
yeah.
minimize the amount of impervious surfaces that would end up needing to go in. But
Yep.
And we don't want to set it up so that people are availing themselves of a private road on which they have no right to drive.
Yeah. So that's completely off the table. We'll
Yeah.
take that one completely
Yeah,
off the
I mean,
table.
we want to look out for the residents, and we also want to look out for the potential customers, right, which could be residents. And the building is built. Whatever happened in the past, it is built. And, I think we also, have some responsibility to work with potential businesses in town. So I think trying to balance all of those, and I think with the waiver, I think we can do that.
But if the permit had been granted in error and there was a caveat put in the record
I'll look
that
for
it
it.
shouldn't all be used, then we need to be mindful of that. And we think there's a good chance that's what happens. And I just prefer to be careful on this. And my observation, having driven by the site and driven on the site recently, matches Mr. Khan's. There weren't many spaces available. And that's with just the current use.
Okay, any other comments regarding this application? All right, so we have a tentative resolution. We've got some open items to come through to make it happen, and we'll see where we land for the next meeting. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Trotta, and thank you, Mr. Henry, for your work with Mr. Trotta. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to the next discussion item, which is 2764 Niskayuna, 64 Troy Road, Niskayuna Animal Hospital site plan application requesting extension of the previously approved site plan for the construction of an 890 square foot addition. Project lead is Mr. D'Arpino, and we have, is it Dr. Gagan? Geegan. Dr. Geegan here with us. Yeah, you can just maybe start out by just coming to the microphone. You can state your name for the record. And nah.
My public speaking is one-on-one.
You just might make sure the microphone's on, and you might have to pull it closer to you. Just make sure we've got.
It has to be a bright green.
Or the light's green, you should be okay.
It is.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's a little tough, but you might have to speak a little louder, okay? Yeah,
I don't think it's on.
It doesn't sound like it's on.
One of the worst designs of microphone I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's light green and dark.
There we go.
All right.
Okay.
Much better already.
Is that a little bit better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
We'll
that's
manage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can't hear myself anyway. So I was requesting Laura knows, Clark knows, because I had came and spoke with them. I had purchased Dr. Sharp's practice in basically the 1st of November of 2020, and he has a zoning site variance to put a connecting building between the two existing buildings. Site plan was approved. It was 890 square feet. I'm fine with everything as is. I'm just requesting a 2-year extension to get it done according to that plan as it exists. It is impossible, both with funding, having been in business less than 2 years, to get funded, and COVID staffing has not been fun. So I lost 2 full-time reception staff in October, and that left us with 2 part-time employees who went up to full-time. So trying to get building projects, architecture, and everything else going. So the site plan as is fine. I can work with that. There isn't anything that needs to change. I just need time. So
Okay.
that's my request.
Yep. Hey, Mr. DiRapino, do you have anything you'd like to add? Dave was the project lead with the original application. That's why
okay.
I'm going to Dave. Dave spent a lot of time, and we went down to the site working through all this in the past. So. There we go.
Okay, I'm having a couple issues here with my volume. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, well, congratulations on your purchase of the business. And we're excited to keep the veterinarian hospital there and work within the parameters of what was approved not that long ago. So I think that some of the other information that the board should know is that the timetable that we've seen with some projects where things started pre-COVID have been postponed or have been delayed for numerous reasons, whether that's funding, staffing, materials are becoming harder to get in a timely manner. We've been working through those. I think that this project probably experienced quite a bit of that towards hopefully the tail end of COVID. And I think it's reasonable to go with a 2-year plan. However, within that 2-year plan, I think we should establish a few milestones that would show that there's a commitment to moving forward with the project. We've done that on a couple past projects, and I think that would be helpful just to keep the project not only on the town's radar, but to show the commitment that this business is going to expand the way that it was envisioned about a year ago.
Okay, and by milestones, I think in the past, like applying for building permits, something along those lines. Is that what you're thinking, David?
Correct.
And that would be some time out. It wouldn't be like next month or something like that.
Oh, no. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so I think there was an email exchange with the town earlier about the process, and yeah, there's definitely some things that you'll need to do. You need to assemble a team of consultants, whether that's architects and engineers, or an engineering lead. They would develop your program based on what your current needs are, where you think you're going to do the expansion. There's some design development that you go through, and then once you get to a certain juncture where you're pretty confident that you've got a decent project, it would be presented to the Architectural Review Board, and that's a committee here in town that would help you just review the initial proposal, give you some feedback on that, and then from there you develop your budget and back into a timetable where you're comfortable getting a building permit. That will take some time, and since you're starting basically from ground level,
Zero.
you're going to need to, you're going to need some time to solicit, professionals to help you, get a contract in place and then, get the designs moving. So I think, the 2-year timeframe is fine, but, we should, maybe say whether it's, 9 months from now, have at least the design application into the architectural review board. And that would show the commitment. Then after that, you can get into looking at how much, the funding would need to be, whether you're going to be going through a lender or you've built up capital. All those things will, help you make your decision.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Part of the first thing, and that's why I had been interested in speaking with you or someone from the architectural review board, how to help that initial process along. First thing is getting an idea of flow, and then veterinary architect first, and then sometimes a local one. There are noise, drainage, heating, air conditioning. It's also a little bit challenging to find out just how functionally obsolete the buildings are. Many times when I have gone to fix things, something else breaks. So it's been interesting. And I had tried to reach out to the original engineer on the site plan, but sort of couldn't get anywhere, which seemed odd because I kind of wanted to consult on what was already there. And I started that process back in